and welcome back to Insights at C5 Insight. Today we have Jason, Malcolm, Emily, and Giovanna, and we'll be talking today about master data management. So first of all, what is master data management? Essentially, it's the organization of company data, the practices that govern how any organization really manages data and data flow. In a lot of ways, it's really synonymous to data governance. Now, what do you all think about the difference between master data management and governance? Do we think it's synonymous? What are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah. So I think MDM and data governance they're related but distinct concepts. MDM is a process of managing the critical data that's used by an organization, often referred to as a master data. This data includes information such as product data, customer data, supplier information, and to me, the goal of MDM is to ensure that the data is accurate, consistent, and up to date across the organization. Now, data governance, on the other hand, is the overall management of that data that is used by that organization. This includes things like developing policies and procedures for managing that data, as well as ensuring the data is properly protected and is used in compliance with relevant laws and regulations, depending on the country you live in. Data governance also kind of encompasses MDM, but also includes other aspects of data management, such as, like I said, data security, data quality, and a lot of times data integration. Kind of once again in summary, MDM is the managing of the critical data, and while governance is the overall security management of the data within an organization.
Yeah,
Nice.
so MDM could be the tools, and I know this might be very specific, but duplicate detection rules, making sure that forms are set up correctly to capture key data. So that's MDM, the actual mastering of that data in your systems. And then governance can be just the oversight, the policies on how to use those tools.
Jason, I think you touched on like some of the reasons and what it's used for. Touched on a lot of important things because we hear it all the time. I know I do with a lot of our customers. They're like, "Hey, we've got all this data and it's sitting in 12 different places. It's in Teams, it's in email, it's in our CRM system. It's supposed to be in our CRM.
We're trying to link
system,
them
but
all
it's in
together
another
and
one." Yeah, right. And we have this information all over the place and we don't know how. And then they come down to the wire like they got to produce this report or this information and they can't because they don't have a single reliable source of data. And if they had MDM practices in place, they probably would have that, right? It'd probably give them the tools necessary to be able to say, yeah, we're going to go grab that data. It's over here reliably every time.
Well, Malcolm, I think that's a big part is that, so much of the strategic planning these days has a lot to do with analytics, via, a Power BI or even some folks, just a good organized SharePoint list can really lead the strategic planning side of really any organization across the board, regardless of the industry you're in. So if you don't have a master, source of truth, how do you make those plans? How do you make those decisions? In reality, in many cases, you can't. You can't visualize that data.
Why do companies struggle so much with it? I ask myself this all the time. Like, why is this such? Because when you think about it and talk about it, you're like, have one place, put your data there, have one set of practices, follow the practices, follow the policies, whatever it is. But it seems so difficult, and I can't always pinpoint why.
I think it's in a lot of ways, it's the lack of understanding or of not knowing what you don't know. I've heard so many companies essentially think that it's the fault of the technology. So we're using this technology and it's a mess. And so we need to change technologies. When in so many cases, moving a technology, that's not going to fix your issue. You need to go to the core of, you need to align your processes and your policies to what you're doing. You need to have a single source of truth, regardless of the technology you're using. I think it's just a misconception, I think, that technology is going to fix your issues instead of actually going back to the root of the problem.
I also wonder if, or what I've seen as well, is individuals who are using these systems thinks of it as a really time-consuming activity to get these tools in place or to perhaps streamline and make sure it's all in one system, when it's actually the opposite, where not having them all in one place, it's more time-consuming to get the data out of all these systems, but it's just that initial setup or organization that's, oh no, it's going to take us too much time, like we'll never be able to do that.
I think a big part of it too is just the organic growth of a business. Apple didn't just show up one day and all of a sudden all their systems were built out. These things happen over time. I think when many businesses start, they may have a SharePoint list, they may have a couple document libraries where they're organizing things, and for a time in small businesses that totally works. But once you hit a growth phase where, hey, you're starting to get more contracts, you're bringing on more employees, those systems have to evolve over time. And maybe the stuff that you built 5 years ago worked when you're a company of 5 people, but now that you have 50 employees and you're bringing on, perhaps you get a government project where you need to have special regulatory compliance for that data. Well, that's a whole different set of MDM policies that you're going to implement for that bit, but you're not necessarily going to backfill all the rest of your data in the, since your company started. So at least from what I've seen, I think we can agree in the call, in a lot of companies, especially ones that have been around for a while, you'll notice that there's almost different tiers of data policy management in the same organization. And that leads to, I think, a lot of issues there where that's why there isn't a source of truth.
Well, so it's a great call out, because what I think we all see happen is you get a company that starts to grow and they have this need, and this team in that company goes and says, we're going to use Dropbox because we don't have a centralized place to put our files. So let's throw Dropbox on anybody and we'll share it with all the whole team, and then everybody's using it. Well, now you've got this pocket of files and mission critical information sitting in this disconnected, totally random location. No offense, Dropbox, but it's now over here. And another team is saying, well, no, we're going to use our SharePoint structure because that's why it was implemented and we already have that set up. And I think that causes all kinds of problems. And if that's just one example, we see that with all kinds of information. Oh, we're going to just use an email. We're going to put it in OneNote. We're going to put it here. We're going to put it there. The problem is there's no consistency and no governance practices in place to guide what should be happening. So yeah, that's interesting.
And all that.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, just on that note about the trying to get them all into one place, but you do have these teams who are going into their pockets and finding the Dropbox or whatever it might be. It's perhaps back to who at the company is going to be responsible for that. There may not be this internal team already built in place. There may not be a governance. I'm sure that there is some form of a governance committee, but who is willing to take that on? That's also perhaps a challenge for some companies, is who is willing to take on that role for their disparate systems.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. A lot of companies that, when they're this evolution of how a company grows, if you don't have the right people in the right seats, and you don't have someone that's willing to take ownership over that data management, like we said, it's almost kind of a regulatory type of position, which doesn't sound super fun and super cool, but it's so critical to maintaining consistency and giving you the ability to build out those analytics and build out those important systems. So yeah, I think that's definitely part of the problem, and yeah, it's a difficult solution to fill out there.
And yet it's still really important, right? Because like the different issues that we're talking about, having all of these, we hear these issues with every client that we work with. We can't find what we're looking for, or we have no idea which system it's on, or there's a lot of duplicates of information and we don't know which one, that single source of truth issue that we hear a lot with our clients. And it's not a system issue, it's a process issue.
Absolutely.
So
what is it? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to ask the team, just, for you guys, if a company is in this position where they have, these different databases, different systems, and different levels of policies, what's a way that they can remedy that? What's the fix here? What's the solution?
Match? No. I think it depends heavily on what the issues are and what the challenges and where do they stem from, right? Is the issue that you've got a group of people who are super innovative and they're just looking for the next best thing to manage their data, or do you have a group of people who are just heads down on what they have to do and where they're putting the information they don't really care about because they're just trying? And I think that's what happens when companies are getting started out. They're being successful. Their focus isn't on how are we going to structure our data? What are we going to name our files when we put them in this place? They're focused on survival and let's get our product out there. Let's focus on our marketing. Let's get people to advocate for us and all that kind of stuff. So I get why they don't do it. But I think, so it depends, which is such a consultant answer, but I think it does depend on the situation for the company. But I know one of the things in my experience, just taking one small step. So identifying one area that they could improve. And I'm speaking from like the Dynamics 365. From my experience, we see a lot of things where, we're missing critical information. Then build a view or a dashboard that grabs all the records that don't have the information you're looking for and devote a half a day to cleaning that information up. Hey, we're missing the zip code on all these customers. Go and find the zip code. It'd probably take you an hour, route through hundreds of records, fix it. Now that problem's gone. And then to go one step further, devote some kind of a process to avoid that issue from coming up again. Make it a required field so that when they do enter it, you can't get away with not putting that data in there. And that's one thing I've seen him work really well.
Yeah,
I think if it's an issue about duplicate information or not the right information, two key things that go a long way is coming to a consensus, whether it's of using the same file management system, whether it's SharePoint or Dropbox or Google Drive, whatever it is you are using as an organization, this is what we're going to use. And then communicating that across the organization to the users. And then second, establishing retention policies in that file management system. So after a certain period of time, these files will no longer be relevant. And so we need to be archiving this. It needs to have maybe some sort of a workflow behind it to move those to a different location. Then it's not cluttering, our live folder structure, wherever it is you're working. So those two things, I think, help a lot with actively working on files and managing a lot of that outdated information.
That's awesome.
Yeah. One other suggestion, again, coming more from the D365 side of things, but could apply to any system really, is perhaps identifying a super user or a power user type of role in your department, on your team, someone who is already an active user of that system who can perhaps oversee some of these activities. Not throwing someone in just kind of out of the blue, here you are now responsible for making sure that everyone's entering their data correctly. Finding a power user, someone who is already in the system, familiar with it, and willing to make that change happen so that everyone using the system is getting what they need out of it. I think that would be a pretty good tip or way of starting this.
Absolutely. And a tip from my side as well. I think it's interesting that these issues typically crop up during a couple different times. One of the ones at C5 we specialize in is migrations. Helping folks go from, perhaps, on-prem to the cloud, or transitioning from, if you're managing your company in Excel files, to bringing it to PowerPoint or Dataverse or any of these systems. So these inconsistencies, they usually crop up during those times when we're migrating data over. I think the best way to identify some of these problems is almost set up a mock migration in your company. Prepare as if, hey, we're going to move all this data over. Maybe get some type of analytics going, or you can have a Power BI file and say, let's just put everything together and build some reports. And during the process of that creation, I promise you, you will find out all the holes in your data. It will be very, very clear. So that's my tip.
Yeah, that's
a great tip.
I like that.
I feel like there's so much more we could unpack on this one topic, and we try and keep these nice and short and condensed, so we'll maybe wrap it up for now. But I feel like we probably gave ourselves 3 or 4 other topics we could talk about. We could hone in on any one of those suggestions and drive that conversation just around that topic. But as always, a great chat just to kind of get the ball rolling on master data management. What is it? How do you do it? How do you do it properly? What are some tips? I hope those who are watching find this useful, and join us next time when we share another episode of Insights with C5 Insight. See ya.
Thanks so much.